Hey, everybody. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have you along with me today. As we dig into our conversation, let me just welcome you all into it. Whether you are joining us on Facebook, whether you're joining us on LinkedIn, whether you are watching from somewhere else, we welcome your participation. If you've got a question, if you've got a comment, please just post it. I will weave it in and try to get you an answer as soon as I possibly can. And I think this is a conversation that you're going to want to participate in because we're talking about the next phase of our lives and a very important decision as we enter the peak 65 zone, that period of time where, as the Alliance likes to say, more people will turn 65 than at any other point in history, to the tune of more than 11,000 a day. 4+ million a year. This will continue for the next few years. And it makes this conversation about where we want to live once we decide to slow down, once we decide to retire, even more relevant and more important. So the question that I have for all of you is, when you think about where you want to be, what is on your must-have list? Do you think about living in a vibrant community where activities are plentiful? I'm talking about more, by the way, than just pickleball. And you're able to make connections with your neighbors. Those might be some items at the top of your list. An increasing number of retirees are finding all of this, and actually much, much more, in what are known as university retirement communities. These are built on college campuses or close by college campuses, and they provide people, residents, with all of the traditional benefits of senior living, plus a lot of great perks. People are able to learn new things in college classes, to cheer on the college teams, and to live in an intergenerational environment where they're able to build relationships, not just with other boomers, but with members of pretty much every other generation. My guest today is an expert in senior living in general and university retirement communities in particular. Andrew Carle is a professor at Georgetown University. He's earned recognition for defining this new category of senior housing. He's also the founder of the website universityretirementcommunities.com, which is the first website directory and information resource for university retirement communities nationwide. Andrew, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Retirement communities.
My pleasure. We lost your audio there for just a second, so I'm glad to see that I can hear you, and I think that this is going to be a very fun conversation as we unpack what these are and why you are finding that they are so attractive to so many people who are looking for a vibrant place to spend the next phase of their life. Let's start, though, by taking a step back. You're an expert in senior housing. You've spent many of your years working in operations in senior housing. When you look at the landscape today, when we say senior housing, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about really anything beyond, for generations, your only choice was stay home or go to a nursing home. I mean, senior living or senior housing, as we've defined it in the last 20 or 30 years, has kind of morphed into everything from active adult communities, but mostly independent living, assisted living. We've really created a niche now in memory care, where I think we're maybe the best in the world at it, frankly, and then skilled nursing care. And so we have these communities called continuing care retirement communities, or now mostly they're called life plan communities. You'll hear both terms, and they offer the full continuum. And that's really where I think a lot of the growth has been, in communities where you can move in and pretty much stay for the rest of your life.
When and where did this idea of linking a senior housing community, a life care community, with a college campus come from?
Well, originally, it was back in the 80s, believe it or not, there were two university presidents, one at Iowa State University, which is one of my favorite schools, and then the president at Indiana University. And they wanted to retire and they didn't want to leave. And they had some colleagues and they had some alums, older alums, and they all wanted to stay. So they basically leased land, I think, for $1. I think one of them never paid the dollar, actually. But they leased some land and they built some little cottage homes and they all retired there. And it was a lot of fun until, of course, they aged. And then they started having some other needs. And eventually they both brought in professional senior living companies to manage these communities. They both exist today. They are both doing great. The one at Indiana is called Meadowwood. The one at Iowa State is called Green Hills. And they were really the founding fathers. Now, really nothing else happened for a while. About 15 years ago, I learned about these because I was running, I think you mentioned, the only academic program in the country for senior living executives. And I heard about Green Hills and Meadowwood. So we got in the car with my family. We drove all summer and visited them. And we visited the one at Notre Dame and the one at Oberlin and the one at Stanford. And we drove all over the place. And what happened is it was organic. It was alumni, retired faculty who were driving this, but they really had no background in senior living. The universities, of course, had no background in senior living. Some of them were very successful. Some of them struggled. Both Iowa State and our Green Hills and Meadowwood struggled, actually, until they brought in professional management. But I got back in around 2004 or 5 and said, this could really work. I mean, here I am, literally the only senior living executive working in academia. Somebody better sit down and noodle this out. So I created a 5 criteria model. And, frankly, in the last 10, 15 years, a lot of them have been built to that model, to those criteria. And we've really seen this kind of acceleration. And the newer ones that have come online, mostly in the last 10 years, are really starting to bring this together. And then, the website is designed to help all of these folks, not just the retirees. It is a directory. It does have it has a whole page called University Retirement Communities 101. It has a bunch of blog articles. But the bottom section of that website is actually for the universities. It's for the senior living providers. It has all of these resources to help them if they want to make the one they have better, if they want to build a new one. And so it's really kind of designed to be this one-stop shop to bring everybody together and then really kind of quantify these 5 criteria in a certification program. Which real quickly we're about to launch here in the next month or so. And we have multiple communities out there who want to be certified. And all of this will help retirees, obviously. They need to know what they're going to get, and it moves the model forward.
We'll get into the criteria because I think the criteria is actually a nice way of framing what you should look for when you look for a retirement community, not just a university retirement community, but a vital retirement community. But before we get there, I think I shared with you, I grew up on a college campus.
Yes.
My father was a university professor, first at Wisconsin and then at Indiana University. We were at IU in the very early 80s, which makes me realize that it was Bob Ryan probably
Yes.
who did not want to leave campus and wanted to start this place. But what is it about a university that is so appealing to people who are thinking about a long retirement? I mean, when we talk about peak 65, we talk about people who really have to plan for or should be planning for the next 20 or 30 years, if not more.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think a lot of it's being driven by several factors. I mean, first of all, it was our parents. I'm a baby boomer, by the way, but I mean, it was our parents who invented the whole concept of the golden years. And then, frankly, studies have shown either we saw or they told us that sitting on a rocking chair and watching the sun go up and down is not all it's cracked up to be. Number one. Number two, baby boomers are the most highly educated retirement demographic in history. Almost a third of baby boomers have a bachelor's degree or higher. Almost 60% of them have some college. And by some college, I mean Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, who had some college before they dropped out. So this is a very highly educated demographic. And basically, study after study has shown they want three things in retirement. They want active, they want intellectually stimulating, and they absolutely want intergenerational retirement environments. They do not want to retire to what I call an elderly island. You know, we built, frankly, a lot of very beautiful senior living communities in this country, and they're not nursing homes, and that's great. And the nursing homes have basically stepped up as well, but they're still kind of elderly islands, and the boomers don't want that. But when you think about active, intellectually stimulating, intergenerational, I basically just described the college campus.
Yeah.
Uh, and they're very loyal to their universities. And, you know, there's a concept called the reminiscence bump that says our most powerful memories are formed between the ages of about 18 and 25 and our first life experiences and when our brains at peak function, just like our bodies. And guess what? That's when you went to college. So there's a reason why some folks have been wearing that college sweatshirt for 50 years. And it's not just emotional, it's actually physiological. They have a very emotional, physiological tie to their university.
Yeah, I know that that is definitely true for me. Dig into the intergenerational part of it though. What is it about being with people who are older than you, younger than you, of all cohorts that is so interesting and necessary?
Well, first of all, I think it's two-way beneficial.
Oh,
Because I've seen where the students benefit from this as well. You know, ageism is one of those isms that remains invisible in our country in a lot of ways. But when I see the students interacting with these residents, their eyes are open to, you know, just how smart they are, just how helpful they are, great people they are. But it also, you know, that old expression, you're as young as you feel. Being around college students makes you feel younger. Very famous study done by Ellen Langer up at Harvard years ago called the counterclockwise effect, where she took a group of retirees to a motel for a week and set the clocks back 20 years, told them they couldn't discuss anything that happened before 20 years ago. And a week later, they actually physically got younger. So your brain's very powerful in terms of this, just being around younger people. I know when I went to work at George Mason University years ago, after years in senior living, I came home and told my wife, you know, I was walking across campus and everything seemed just all these flashbacks. And I think the first lecture hall I walked into, they used the same floor detergent or floor cleaner they used at the University of Buffalo where I went, and it smelled the same, you know. And I thought, you know, you just have these kind of, it takes you all back. And now we know that actually there's some truth to that, that you actually can feel younger and be younger if you're in an intergenerational environment.
is that what you mean when you say there's research that university retirement communities can reverse aging?
I actually did talk to Ellen Langer at Harvard about this after she wrote her book. And I said, you know, what if you combined the counterclockwise effect? You took back people 20 years. But what if you combined it with the reminiscence bump, which would take them back to their 20s? And I called it the counterclockwise bump. If there's any researcher out there in gerontology, please call me. Because not only am I convinced that that would maximize the counterclockwise effect, I think you could measure it, and I think it would be, you know, really synergistic to combine both the reminiscence bump and the counterclockwise effect. But long story short, when I told Dr. Langer about it, she said, "You're absolutely right. I think you're right," and she was interested in the study. So I really think that it's something we could look into. But you know what? We could set all that aside. People intuitively know. People know. There's a reason they're drawn to these universities. There's a reason they're drawn to their alma mater. And all I would say to them is your instincts are probably right.
As we said earlier, you've developed a set of criteria. You've developed a set of 5 factors
Mhm.
that URCs have to include or incorporate in order to be certified.
Right.
How'd you land on these 5 things? Tell us a little bit about them. And then I'd like to talk about whether they apply just to university retirement communities, or if you are a person who's looking for any retirement community, not necessarily at a university, if these are also things that you should be looking for.
Right. Well, I mean, look, I think I was fortunate again because of my position. I just happened to be fluent in two languages, university, academia, and senior living. And sometimes when I'm consulting between these two, I feel like the UN translator, frankly. But I just looked at it and said, look, what's the best from both worlds? And what do people need? What do you need on the university side that will maximize your experience? But what do you need on the operations side that ensures, frankly, the long-term success of these projects? Because these are, two different worlds. I mean, it doesn't get much different than universities who are dealing with 20-year-old students and senior living providers who deal with 80-year-old retirees. So you really want to have some checks and balances in place. So I came up with these criteria to just kind of say, if you follow this roadmap, your odds of success are at least, I think, improved. And, the first one is, frankly, proximity. I mean, the one thing that 80-year-old retirees and 20-year-old college students have in common is neither one have cars. So you want to be within about a mile of the camp. And when we all went to college, if you lived more than about a mile off campus, you didn't feel like you were part of the university. It's not just the campus; it's the surrounding community in that environment. So I think that's very important. The second thing is a full continuum of services. Even more than traditional senior living communities, alums, retired faculty, they don't want to leave. So for them, they don't want to be told, when I get to the point where I need skilled nursing or assisted living or memory care, that my last memory of my alma mater is they asked me to leave. Or my last memory as the retired university president that I had to leave my alma mater. So they feel even more strongly about they want to come and they want to stay. And if you're the vice president of philanthropy, you might want to think about that. The third part is just the programming, really formalize it. And this is where it often has fallen apart. They all think it's just going to work. And it doesn't. Universities can be very bureaucratic, very slow moving. Senior living providers want to get things done tomorrow. So I really work with them to say, you need to put in writing, what are the formalized connections? How do the students access the community for internships, for practicums, for jobs, for volunteering? How do the residents access the campus? And and lifelong learning opportunities, or lifelong learning institute, or the athletic events, or the visual performing arts, or the library, or the food court. Frankly, a lot of these URCs now, they'll give you basically a student ID, which is a really cool thing when you're 80 years old to have the equivalent of a student ID. So how do you make that programming work? And then the fourth one is really kind of the financial side. How do you ensure that there's a financial incentive on both sides, a commitment? I've seen some of these, unfortunately, become what I call a stranger on campus scenario, because there wasn't an incentive to work together long term. They just kind of drift apart, and they don't really have anything to do with each other, which is frankly kind of a waste. So how do you do that? Well, maybe it's a land lease with the university. Maybe you licensing rights to use their name. They shouldn't give their name away. License the use of their name. Maybe it's contract medical staff or nursing staff from the medical school, the nursing school, into the nursing home or assisted living. Some way that you can share some of these expenses or benefit each other. Even frankly, a lot of the contract purchase services, as an old operator, universities have food service, they have landscaping, they have security, they have transportation. So does senior living. Why are
Right.
you duplicating expenses? Maybe share them. So that just kind of brings them together on that. And then the last criteria is really about the culture. I look for at least 10% of the residents, just not very many, frankly, but at least 10% to either be alums or retired faculty or staff. And what I've seen is if 1 out of every 10 residents is walking around wearing the sweatshirt, it kind of brings that it ensures that the culture of the university is there. And then, quite frankly, most of the really good ones, they're seeing 50, 60, 70% of the residents who are alums or retired faculty or staff.
Wow. Those are some pretty high numbers. What if what if I am thinking that I like the idea of a senior living community. I like, but maybe my university isn't the calling card I need.
Mhm.
What if I like the idea of a community? Are there other niche communities that have built around other sorts of interests?
Yeah, there are. And I've done a lot of work in what I call affinity communities or niche communities as well. Here's what we know about baby boomers. And again, I'm one. But basically, every decade of our lives, we've blown up the portfolio of products, any industry we've come in contact with. I mean, we're the reason there's 50 flavors of baby food. I mean, we're the reason that for some reason there's like 3 dozen kinds of blue jeans. They're blue jeans. I don't get it, but there they are. We're the reason that there's 14 flavors of Coca-Cola. By the way, the second brand of Coca-Cola ever came out in 1985, Diet Coke, which happened to be the first year the baby boomers were turning 40 and getting fat. So what we've seen from the boomers in every decade, this is what we do. We got 78 million people, and we want more flavors on the shelf, and we're not going to settle for vanilla or just chocolate or strawberry. We want mint chocolate chip. We want Oreo cookie dough. So this is what we do. And my point is this: when we get to our retirement, we want more flavors. We're not going to settle for 3 or 4 choices. An assisted living or a light independent living or a CCRs. No, we want more choices. University retirement communities, I think, are maybe the most popular choice for the reasons we discussed. But, Jimmy Buffett a few years ago opened a senior living community called Margaritaville. 100,000 inquiries in the first 3 months after
Wow.
they announced the community. They hadn't even broken ground. We spend years in senior living trying to get 100,000 inquiries. By the way, university retirement communities are quite frequently 95% pre-sold before they open. In an industry where typically we figure 2 to 3 years to reach that level of occupancy after opening. So what we're seeing is the power of putting more flavors on the shelf.
Uh,
So
in
Margaritaville, Disney now is talking about an active adult community. I have friends down in Australia trying to launch a cruise ship, retirement cruise ship. There's an RV assisted living community in Texas, and I could go on, but there's a lot of these examples.
One of the things that we know about life in retirement is that you have to pay for it. I mean, that is something that we talk about on this show all the time. The challenge of accumulating enough for retirement and then figuring out how to stretch that money over your lifetime, sometimes by incorporating annuities, which will provide you with a lifetime paycheck, or other solutions that make the money essentially go as far as it possibly can. When it comes to financing a move into a senior living community, how much does it typically cost? And how should people who are interested in this sort of a scenario be thinking about preparing to make that happen?
Well, first of all, I think let's look at life plan communities, continued care retirement communities. So there's about 2,000 of those. I think about 1,300 are what are called entry fee communities. So you pay sometimes a fairly large entry fee to get in, and then the trade-off is you have a lower rent while you're there, and then when you leave, you get sometimes 90% of that back. They basically borrow your money while you're there to help fund the operations, and then in exchange for that, they give you a lower rent and all of that. Now, those move-in fees can be $100,000. They can be over $1 million. There are some communities that are $3-4 million. That's unusual. I would say the average is typically 200 to 300, 400,000. And then once you move in, you have your rent and independent living assisted, whatever. And there's different contracts you can buy, a little bit complicated to get in today. But basically, it's kind of an insurance plan, and you get what you need for as long as you're there. About the other 700 or so are straight rental. And that's a model that more people are moving to. Some of the retirees, and to your point, are a little cautious about handing over $300,000.
Yeah.
And so they've done the math themselves, and they said, rather than me loan you my $300,000, why don't I hang on to it and I'll pay you a little bit more rent, but I'll manage my $300,000 myself. Thank you. And so they're doing that, and we're seeing some of that trend. The bottom line is senior living, since I got into it almost 30 years ago, has always been predicated on home equity, frankly. We know it's a rule I made up myself, but I call it the 70-70 rule, which basically says about 70% of people over the age of 70 own their home free and clear. But we've known that in our industry. I don't know if they've articulated it that way, but that's how I've always looked at it. And then, last year, I think at the end of Q4, the average home value in the United States was just below $500,000. So you're talking about folks who are sitting on $500,000 before they even touch their Social Security or savings. So I think that, look, not everybody can afford senior living, but we've seen some studies that show that staying at home can cost you almost as much every year. When you're sharing the expenses with 200 other folks, turns out there's some economy of scale in moving in. But typically it's the move-in fee, or that kind of, I need at least a lump sum to get in there and be comfortable. And that's pretty much predicated on the equity in your home, whether you're willing to give it up, whether you wanted to save it for your children. These are the decisions folks have to make. But I would also encourage them to do the math of what it costs to stay home. Because again, you still, even if you paid off your mortgage, you've got insurance, you've got taxes, you've got utilities, you've got food, you've got gas, you got your car, you got somebody's mowing your lawn. If you need a new roof or a hot water heater, and we've done the math on this in the senior living industry, and we've been able to show folks, staying home isn't free either.
Right.
So they really just have to sit down and crunch the numbers and do. Ironically, we're talking about going back to university. I just assigned homework.
I have seen, as I'm sure you have, a number of surveys from different organizations that ask people where they want to live as they age. And the majority of people say at home. And yet we know that interest in university retirement communities, in other senior living solutions, is also growing. So is there a shift underway? Is there something that's happening that is saying to these people who previously thought they wanted to age at home that maybe they don't?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, a couple of things. One, a lot of that, and I have good friends at ARP because I'm right here in Washington, D.C., but they tend to come out with this survey every year that say something like, 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 ARP members want to stay home in their retirement. Well, but remember, you can join ARP when you're 50. You're 15 years, 20, sometimes 25 years away from when it's even going to matter. I've said to my friends at ARP, you need to start asking people 75 and 80 how they feel about that, number one, because it changes. And secondly, I think it's to my earlier point, we weren't building options that were really that desirable. We built some very, very beautiful senior living communities. And no doubt about it. Grand staircases, big chandeliers, baby grand pianos in the lobby. But in some ways, we were still building them kind of on top of a mountain or out in the middle of somewhere. And they were elderly islands. And it's not a disparagement of my own industry. They're still wonderful communities, very happy people, 90% plus satisfaction rates. But it wasn't enough to budge some people out of their homes. And then now look what I talked about a minute ago with Margaritaville. Look what I talk about with URCs that are 95% pre-leased, sometimes 6 months before they even open. So this is really just about giving the next generation, any generation, better choices. And we haven't done that in the past, and now we are.
I'm very conscious of the fact, as I would be naturally, that as a woman, I'm likelier to outlive my spouse. Women are we have greater longevity than men do in general, and it often means that we're spending the latter portions of our last decades by ourselves, single, for the first time in a long time. Can you talk about URCs or senior living in general as a solution for women who are starting to envision themselves as a version of the Golden Girls?
Sure, and actually we're seeing some studies on this now. Again, we've had all this anecdotal stuff, right? And now we're beginning to see the studies. And the World Health Organization just a few years ago pronounced loneliness among the elderly as a worldwide epidemic. An epidemic. I think one study said it was the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or something on your health. But then we're also seeing the benefits of senior living, where the Mather Institute, Mather Lifeway is out of Chicago, senior living provider. I think they partnered with Northwestern, but they did a 5-year study they just completed last year. And in the very first year of that study, they showed that residents of senior living communities, life plan communities, actually scored higher on 5 out of 6 domains of wellness what we call domains of wellness. 5 out of 6 than residents, than seniors, peer group seniors who stayed at home. They scored higher on emotional wellness, higher on physical wellness, social wellness, intellectual wellness, vocational wellness, which is, when you're young is your career, but in your retirement, your hobbies and activities. They scored higher on every one of those. The only one they didn't score higher on was spiritual, because a lot of seniors who stay at home keep going to the same church they've been going to for 40 years. But the interesting part was they just concluded the 5-year studies, and it carried all the way through year 5. They were scoring higher. So we're seeing now that senior living is more than just, well, this is a place I can go. It actually can be quite good for you. And then to wrap all of that up, look what I was talking about at the beginning of basically the counterclockwise bump, and how that could exponentially factor all of that even higher. So it's very powerful.
So if you have been listening to this conversation and you're thinking, hey, this is interesting to me, I'd like to learn more. I don't know if my university has anything like this, or if the universities in the town where I've raised my kids or where I grew up have anything like this. A, how do you find them? But B, how do you check them out? Because I would think that the scenario you don't want is when you move someplace and then you decide it's just not for you.
Right. I mean, that's true in general. People should always do their homework, always. In senior living, it's not unusual to offer a free stay for a few nights or things like that. If they don't have it written somewhere, ask. I've always told families for years, just ask. We have guest apartments. Go try it out. Visit the town, obviously, if it's not your alma mater. Spend some time. You should do that. People want to retire to these college towns. Okay, well, I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York. Sometimes that's not all it's cracked up to be. So, go visit the town. If you like a small town, great, but maybe you want a bigger city, right? Maybe you want a university near a bigger city. So you got to look these things up. Again, it's about doing your homework. The website, universityretirementcommunities.com, is a directory. We just added our 87th community yesterday. We've only been up, we launched in the fall semester. But, we're hearing from communities all the time, hey, we're one of those. Now, the one thing we do is we have them document that they do have some connection to a university, but that could be minimal. It could be all the way up to the 5 criteria. So we're not claiming on the website, short of our certification program, which I think will take that to another level. And we'll list the certified communities on our website. But in the meantime, I would say, look, you can go to the site, you can look at the map, you can look at the list by region, Northeast, South, Midwest, West. I mean, you can, click it on, you can search by state, you can go to their websites, but then you need to do what you're supposed to do anyway. Talk to them, visit, tour more than once, try the food, talk to some residents randomly in the lobby. These are things I've been telling families for 25 years.
So I think I would be remiss, Andrew, as we start to wrap this conversation up if I don't ask you what retirement actually looks like for you. As you, I mean, clearly the lay of the land of senior living communities, not just around the country, but around the world. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be?
Well, it's kind of fun. I know we were chatting about this earlier, but I get teased all the time because technically I'm retired. And yet here I am starting a website from scratch at 65 years old, which, by the way, is, they say when you retire, you should learn how to play an instrument or speak a new language. I now know how to make a website. So there you go. So I've been exercising my brain, but I think that, I want what we've been talking about. I want an active retirement. I want an intellectually stimulating retirement. I do want an intergenerational retirement, having spent now over 20 years on campus. I see the value of it. I didn't need any study to tell me that. So I think that I want what a lot of people want. I know that I think I would have a personal interest in a university retirement community. I would. My wife went to the University of Virginia, which is not far from us. They have a retirement community. She has pointed that out to me more than once. I mentioned a colleague I have in Australia trying to launch a retirement cruise ship. My wife has mentioned that to me more than once. I just think there's a world of options out there. And even if your definition of retirement is still doing stuff like I am, there are ways that you can do it and still find the environment that's right for you. I would encourage anybody out there to just really sit down and think about what interests you. And if it's not out there right now, if it's not a flavor on the shelf right now, demand it,
Yeah,
because
or start it, right?
my industry will respond if they realize that there's a flavor that they missed. I actually made a joke years ago with a reporter from Chicago Tribune. I said there should be a retirement committee for Grateful Dead fans. And she said, "Oh, come on, that wouldn't work." I said, "You're talking about a band that once drew 250,000 people to a concert in Central Park. You think we couldn't fill one 200 resident retirement community with Grateful Dead fans in this country?" It really is endless what you can do if you really just get together and collectively say this is what we want.
Absolutely. An interesting question came in through the chat from Warren. He asks if there's any data around donations from residents to these university communities. It seems that these legacy contributions would be something to measure, he notes.
Yeah, I think it was Oak Hammock. I can't remember. Oak Hammock's a retirement community associated with the University of Florida. Really terrific community, by the way. And I think that they tracked the data. And boy, I want to be careful on the numbers here, but it was several $1,000,000 that they discovered could be traced in contributions directly from the residents over the course of a few years. So now that's not a guarantee. I tell university presidents all the time, you don't get into this because you think you're gonna, get a bunch of money. But that's icing on the cake. And by the way, and and also you need to be paying attention to what's going on in your world anyway, because
Yes.
a fifth of our population is going to be over the age of 65, and every community, every university I've ever seen has something in their mission statement about serving the community. Well, your community is changing. By the way, your traditional student enrollment's going down, so you might want to be paying attention to all of this. So I really think it's a good strategic move for universities. A lot of them are thinking about it. Look, there's 2,500 four-year academic institutions in this country. We have maybe 100 URCs today. So that, I mean, that number could double, triple, quadruple, and it still wouldn't be, anywhere near all of them. So there's lots of opportunity for growth here.
Fantastic. Thank you for a really interesting conversation. For folks looking for more information, where would you like them to go?
Well, I mean, we created the website for them. So universityretirementcommunities.com, all one word. Have fun, click things. There's, you can ask, there's a contact us page if you have questions. If you know of a community we should know about, let us know. We're discovering them all the time. And then really, keep paying attention moving forward, because once we start the certification program, by the way, if you meet all 5 criteria, you're what we call a UBRC, the university-based retirement community. If you meet 3 or 4, then you will be trademarked as a ULRC, or a university-linked retirement community. And if you meet only 1 or 2, that's fine, but you're a UARC, or a university-affiliated retirement community. But you can see what we've done there. We've created a way for retirees to have a much better understanding of what they would be getting when they go to these communities, and frankly, a roadmap for that sector moving forward to say, look, these are the criteria. If you're not
Yep.
meeting, don't change, convert, build to them, build from scratch to them, whatever you want. But this is how we're trying to bring this all together for everyone.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much. For more information from the Alliance, you can also check out our website. It is protectedincome.org. And for information on this conversation in particular, protectedincome.org/Carle. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Jane.
Bye.
Bye.